Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of Colonel Fancy Reviews. I meant to have this episode up almost a month ago, but I've had so many issues, whether they be personal problems, technical problems, everything put me behind the eight ball with this project. But I'm finally glad to have it finished, and hope that you get some enjoyment out of it. Adios. I remember the first time I saw a Double Dragon. I was about 5 years old, and we used to live about a block away from a corner store that had several arcade machines like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. One day they had one that had a really cool emblazoned dragon going down the side of the cabinet. I didn't have the money. My older brother and cousin did, and they put the quarters in and they started playing, and they were beating up dudes left and right until they got to the big brick wall that a Bobo burst through and pretty much annihilated them in a couple of seconds. But it was insane to see. I'd never seen anything like that before in a video game, and it was pretty compelling. I couldn't wait to play it myself at some point.
Double Dragon is the essential brawler game that made the genre stable throughout the 80s going into the 90s. Prior to the saga involving the Lee brothers, Jimmy and Billy, Technos Japan developed the eventual cult hit line of Kunio games, notably Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun, or Hot Blooded Kunio, released in the West as Renegade, as well as spin-offs Super Dodgeball and River City Ransom, but Double Dragon was a household name and the home ports were eventual.
As computer gaming and home consoles became more of a staple in the mid to late 80s, there were many versions of Double Dragon to appear on home consoles enough to make your head spin. But I didn't get my start on those. I got my start on the Atari 2600.
Okay, so I guess beggars can't be choosers, and it was the Atari 2600, so I guess I can't be too picky. And for a home port, I guess it wasn't completely terrible, it was just downright pathetic. Other than a credible version of the Double Dragon theme coming out of the 2600, I found this game to be a frustrating mess. I could never get the attacks to work the way I wanted, the enemies took forever to defeat, and sometimes I wasn't even sure if I'd hit them or not. This game was about as hard as challenging a bear astronaut to a game of chess. Ever try that? It's not easy. Yeah, the NES version, now we're talking. This game was awesome and radically different. Seem to be experiencing some technical difficulties. Hang on a second. I'm not supposed to blow it! Shut up, it's an effect. Like the arcade, the game starts off with domestic violence. Awesome! Some noticeable differences from the arcade version: instead of cooperative gameplay, players 1 and 2 take alternate turns in between each respective's death. Due to the limitations of the console's memory, only the player and 2 enemies can generally be on the screen at the same time. Exclusive to the NES port is the EXP system, wherein after acquiring 1,000 points, you gain new attacks.
Kensoku no Tame no Jikan!
So, I think this calls for Each punch is worth 20 points, each kick is worth 15, the headbutt is worth about 11 points, so this is what I do. Just beat up on the 2 wheels until you get at least 3 hearts. This will provide you with a jump kick, and it comes in handy pretty early. During this process you might take a bit of a pounding, but once you get the jump kick, you can become a little bit of an escape artist and you can get out of dodge before you die. Mind you, enemies like Black Roper here can also do the jump kick, so be very wary of that. I'd appreciate the way you saying black! Early, less difficult stages of a Bobo can be taken out with a barrage of punches, so stay close on him and just wail away to give you some extra experience points. On average, by mission 2, I already have the shoulder throw. This means that you can do away with Small Fry pretty easy and you can just defeat Shin in a matter of seconds. Mission 3, The Forest, is radically different from the arcade. The difficulty gets kicked up a significant notch and the enemies become far more aggressive. But this is where the game decides it wants to be a big jerky jerk. Traps and obstacles. What lunatic in Technos Japan took these controls and said, "Hey, you know what would be a clever idea? Dodging stalactites!" Damn it! Platform jumping is not something that should be a regular occurrence in a Double Dragon game. It just doesn't fit. It's so out of place. Alright, here we go. They'll find me in the Alps! The final scenario in the game features a gauntlet of all of the previous enemies you fought before, only they're this much harder. Then it's time for the showdown with Roper. He totes a gun, so he's incredibly dangerous. I found kicks to be a little bit slow, so I went with my original Abobo strategy and just wailed on him with punches. Proved to be a little effective. Approach him in a straight line, you're dead meat. Yeah, how do you like them apples, huh? You're in my ballpark now. What are you gonna do? Can't do nothing, can you? You can't. Oh, no crap. No. Damn it. That music's gonna haunt the soul. Now, so when you get a chance to knock him down, stand very close to him and just wail on him with punches. There's very little he can do to get out of the cycle because he's gonna keep trying to shoot. But you're too close and the bullet's just gonna keep going through you. Now it's time for the ultimate showdown and it's... Jimmy? Jimmy? So, yeah, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but according to the sources that I looked up, in this port story, Jimmy is the leader of the Shadow Dragons and wants to defeat you for Marion's honor. First off, any brother that is macking on their brother's girl, that's just all kinds of wrong, man. What the hell? Secondly, you backstabbing little fart knocker, no wonder the game's one player. Challenge-wise, I thought Roper was a tougher fight. Jimmy can mirror your attacks and is a little bit aggressive, but alternate your punches, kicks, jump kicks, and elbows, and it really doesn't take all that much to send him packing. Defeat him, save the day, and you rescue Marion, and apparently that little kitty cat under the table as well. And also what I can only assume is the most awkward conversation on the walk home.
You know, it's not too late in the day, we could catch a movie.
You had Marion kidnapped and you aligned yourself with the Shadow Warriors to try and have me killed!
I mean, it's all good, no one got hurt.
Watched as a thug punch me in the stomach. We went to high school together.
But hey, I didn't tell him to shoot you at least. I want you out of my dojo.
Let's stop briefly by Mega Drive Town to take a look at the Sega Genesis port of Double Dragon, and it's a pretty damn good port. It's almost arcade perfect. The 3-button control scheme provided is just what the doctor ordered. None of that stupid simultaneous button pressing to land on stupid platforms. My only legitimate knock against this game is that the sound effects are total garbage. Was that an enemy dying, or did I eat a piece of fruit in Pac-Man? I will always be eternally impressed when the SNES and the Genesis gets their 16-bit asses handed to them by the NES and the sound effects department. That being said, I think Abobo's theme totally rocks coming out of the Genesis. It's really funky. Double Dragon 2 The Revenge came out on the NES in 1990. After the defeat of the Shadow Warriors, and what I assume were some reconciliations between the Lee brothers, Marion is gunned down by Willie as vengeance for their defeat. This is the first time that I can recall a character being killed in an NES game. The core controls feel pretty much the same, but the graphics are a little more defined this time around. The biggest difference that you immediately notice is the A and B buttons strike in front or behind you, depending on where you're facing. It's a little strange at first, but it doesn't take quite long to get rid of. The moves include the hurricane kick and that dreaded knee blast. That is one of the most satisfying attacks in any video game ever. It's a little too bad that actually trying to pull it off is such a pain in the ass and just leaves me jumping around like a jackass most of the time. I can't even really find a science to it. All I wind up doing is just trying to mash the buttons at the right time, but I just get frustrated. Go buy an NES Max. Save yourself the heartache.
It's time! It's time! It's beta time!
Another pro tip. 8 times out of 10, this chopper's gonna hit you. You do have a more substantial life bar in Double Dragon 2, and it doesn't deplete quite as quickly as the first one. You do still have a fair share of pesky enemies like the Chin Brothers here that you have to fight on a 2-dimensional plane without the luxury of a Y-axis. Pretty convenient. Yeah, I see how you're working with. Have the flippy agile ninjas jump around you throwing shurikens and striking you with elbows. Well, they're kind of frustrating, but beatable. Stage hazards like the helicopter mission's vacuum door are the things that I really like. It keeps your mind on the combat while at the same time focusing on another obstacle that can hinder you. Getting punched in the face is one thing, but you're hoping that permed and relaxed hair to Bobo doesn't throw you over by the door. Or you can just pull shady stunts like this for an easy victory. Hey, go with what works. Another little interesting portion that demands a little more thought. Your ability to jump here is kind of hindered by the spikes above, so you've got to learn to use your other attacks a little more creatively. Mission 6 was always the hardest stage to me, and this would be the furthest that I would get. I would always wind up here and just keep dying, and I wouldn't have enough lives to proceed further. Slightly more finely tuned, yes, but these controls still aren't fit for platform jumping! I always try to count at least 2 full seconds before I make my leap, but I never feel certain about it. Alright, that's it. Now I'm mad. Time for an uppercut party. Oh, no, I'm the one that's dangerous! Oh, more platform jumps, you gears! Why the gears? Is this Castlevania 3 all of a sudden? Moving on! Eventually, when you get to the end, you wind up in a fight with a Ditto that becomes you, and it does a whole bunch of shady moves like becoming invisible, and then, I don't know, doing something with you that knocks you down, and has the ability to fire Hadouken fireballs. The final confrontation is preceded by a bait and switch. You go to rescue what you think is Marion, but it only turns out to be an illusion from, Saint Seiya villain, I guess. I kinda like this fight with the illusionist. I don't really think he's all too difficult, but he does a lot of chicanery and has a bunch of twisty moves that makes your head spin a little bit. My favorite part of the fight is when you start winning and then victory music begins to play. And in totally epic fashion that only Konami could be proud of, he goes down. That was a really cool fight. And Marion is saved in the end. Turns out that you can just bring people back from the dead by beating up funny-looking villains. Or illusionists. Or, whatever he was. I don't know. Science is there to back this up. The following year, in 1991, Double Dragon 3 The Rosetta Stone was released on many other home ports, but still sticking with the NES, and this is where I started to lose my patience. The story's pretty inconsequential and doesn't really matter. Some old lady tells you to go find thugs so you can get Brock's rocks. The combat is back to being the standard punch-kick combination, with a couple of new moves like the cart flip head throw, but it just feels a tad bit stiffer, and quite often attacking leaves you locked in place and it gives the enemies an opportunity to just gang up on you. This is just the first screen in the game, and if you go in flying blind, you're gonna be in for a rude awakening. Much like the Sonic knee strike in Double Dragon 2, the cart flip head throw is a move that you want to pull off, but getting the timing right is just a little bit iffy, and it winds up getting you in danger if you miss it. And too many mistakes often in this game, especially early, will cost you dearly, because you've only got one life until you get to the other levels.
Game over, yeah!
Double Dragons 1 and 2 eased you into their difficulty, but Double Dragon 3 doesn't care. It throws you right out of the frying pan and into the lava. Insane difficulty, the inability to get your moves to work correctly, and one life early on just makes this incredibly unrewarding. I've played my fair share of hard video games, but very few games are so difficult to the point that even beating them comes off as a hollow victory. The Rosetta Stone starts to feel like a litmus test or some sadistic science experiment at some point, like testing the effects of negative reinforcement. The waves of enemies just keep coming, and they don't go down easy, so you just start to lose your mind and you become distilled. So much emotional energy is put into defeating just a simple wave of enemies that you begin to get a little bit mentally exhausted. I've spent hours recording a lot of this footage, and dying every single time kind of breaks my spirit a little bit. Acquiring allies like Chin and Ranzu certainly help, but unlike the previous games, your health bar doesn't regenerate when you enter rooms. This means constantly switching back and forth between your various allies in order to preserve as much health as possible. Chin and Ranzu certainly have attributes. Chin is stronger but moves way slower. Ranzu is faster but has absolutely zero defense. I have absolutely no shot against the final boss here, but he's all I've got. Everybody else is gone.
I can't do it. I can't beat it. I did once before. Years ago. I guess I just got lucky, but I just can't do it. Why is this game so unforgivably hard?
Maybe I shouldn't complain, because compared to Double Dragon 3 on the Game Boy, the NES version is a cakewalk. Offensive attack in this game should be called getting punched by. This is just the first screen of the game, and I'm immediately destroyed by the foes that attack me. I don't even know if my hits are connecting or not, because much like the Atari version, there's virtually no hit detection, so it's very hard to tell. By the way, that picture in the top left, is that supposed to be Billy Lee's profile pic or King from Art of Fighting? I never played Double Dragon 3 in the arcades. This was my introduction to the shop feature. You can buy life, power-up, or a weapon, and it does help to a degree, but it does very little to actually curb the difficulty. My patented strategy of moving north and south and luring opponents into a wall of fists and feet does not apply here. By the time I figured out the proper way to combat my enemies, I've sustained so much damage that there's no realistic way that I'd survive. This is only the second screen in the game, and I had started out with 7 lives, now I'm down to 2, and I need that and whatever life bar that I have left to figure out a way to beat this kung fu kicking Hershey bar and his thugs without dying. I don't know what a trick is, but I'll buy that for $1. Oh, great trick, I look like a karate fighter. Special move aside, I still continue to get ragdolled by the computer and haven't particularly found a way of proceeding without taking much damage. The wave of indestructible enemies keep coming, and eventually I succumb to all of the pressure and I'm soon defeated. Well, turns out tricks really are for kids. The SNES is the greatest home console ever made and is home to some of the most notable beat-em-ups ever, like Batman Returns, Turtles in Time, and Bill Walsh's College Football. Favorite is Super Double Dragon for good reason. Oh my god, this game is absolutely amazing. It's the first Double Dragon game that I felt could legitimately contend with Sega's Streets of Rage. The graphics are better, the music is better, the controls are completely fluid, gone is that stiff rigidness and 50-50 iffiness of the NES games, and now you actually feel like you're in control of the combat. There's counter moves, there's blocking, the jump kicks are much better, you have a chance to retaliate and prepare for any sort of option that the enemy throws at you. It feels balanced. And the music. That familiar Double Dragon theme emitting from the Super Nintendo in its orchestrated glory is a thing of beauty. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Made even more incredible is the efforts that went into Super Double Dragon's design. Generally, beat-em-ups are pretty straightforward and simplistic, but this one really attempted to add a great deal of depth to the combat and the enemy placement. The ability for the enemies to counter you and you to counter them opens up another dimension to the combat that didn't exist in previous Double Dragon games, and you actually have the ability to have an effective defensive strategy. With these core enhancements implemented, this makes this the very best Double Dragon game ever made, and almost one of the best brawlers ever. I only say almost because this game is actually not finished. Muneki Ibanuma, lead designer, stated in a 2004 interview that there were plans to include cutscenes to flesh out the story. Unused sprites and scripts can be found, and the prospects in theory of what this game could have been probably could have resulted in a phenomenal final product, and it only makes me wish to see this through its completion. They were so pressed for time that there wasn't even a legit ending. You defeat Duke and all you get is a black screen that says Billy and Jimmy have never been seen again, but their heroics will live on. What? There's something incredibly depressing about the fact that the very best Double Dragon game would turn out to be the incomplete one. Without a proper conclusion, it feels empty. But unfortunately, this would be the last Double Dragon game produced in this style for the time. A year later, Rare and Tradewest would team up together and they would develop Battletoads and Double Dragon, branded as the Ultimate Team. And this is really where the disappointment started to kick in for me. Without the influence of Technos Japan, Billy and Jimmy were subjugated to curry favor to these stupid Ninja Turtles knockoffs. It wasn't really a meeting of the minds, it was pretty much watching Double Dragon play Battletoads. It was a Battletoads game. They couldn't even get the Lee brothers' hair colors right. Is that really supposed to be a Bobo? It looks like Rob Liefeld's wet dream.
The Bobo good at fight. You jerks not stand chance.
Give me a break. Well, if you haven't deciphered from my tone by now, yes, I absolutely hate this game, mostly because I just hate Battletoads. They incorporated absolutely nothing from Double Dragon except taking the Lee brothers and throwing them in this minstrel show of a beat-em-up.
What? What's that? Did I just call out Battletoads? Yeah, that's right, I called out Battletoads. I hate that game.
Other than some pretty decent music, Battletoads contributed nothing to the world of gaming, and having to watch Double Dragon play second fiddle to these posers really pisses me off. I treat it like the McRib. If Battletoads was so great, how come it still isn't around? And much like the McRib, it'll give you a really bad case of indigestion.
To be a dragon, you gotta be strong.
Oh god, no. Do I really have to talk about this? Unbeknownst to a populace that led good lives, there was a short-lived Double Dragon cartoon. And it was atrocious! Oh my god, this exemplified some of the worst cartoons of the 90s. You didn't even have to watch the show to find out what's wrong with it, just listen to the opening.
Never intentionally harm another. Do not battle if you can avoid it. You, Billy Lee, a Dragon Master now!
Dragon Master was born with the mark of the Double Dragon.
The Dragon Master was born with the mark of the Double Dragon? What does that even mean? And yeah, helicopters, glowy swords, plasma beams, and Kai energy. They were totally hoping for a toy line with this. It comes off as shilling of the highest order. Yeah, let's make a bunch of colorful characters and wacky designs and hope that Playmates will throw a contract at us. Hey, remember in Double Dragon when Billy Lee used Ki energy to bend metal?
Very good. 18 years ago, I said you would be Dragon Master.
By Dragon Master, I mean Magneto. For no discernible reason in this show, Billy and Jimmy are separated at birth, which culminates to nothing, and Billy hangs out in a dojo here with Skate from Streets of Rage.
You have to stop them!
Michael, remember the code of the dragon.
Remember the code of the dragon? I'm Christopher Walken. I can assure you, I have every intention on talking about this show in much greater detail at a later date. It's certainly on my docket. However, it was responsible for the next game in the Double Dragon series. Double Dragon 5, The Shadow Falls, developed by Leland Entertainment, and the fighting game that nobody ever asked for. By this point in fighting game tenure, you've already had options to Samurai Showdown, Fatal Fury, Street Fighter, and Mortal Kombat, so to pick this game up, you would either have to be a fan of the show or you've got one bullet left in the chamber. The game isn't terrible, it's certainly playable, it's just incredibly generic, and with characters with names like Bones and Trigger Happy and Ice Pick, enemies from the show, it's kind of a wonder as to who this game would actually relate to. You okay there, buddy? I'm not particularly saying that a fighting game based off of Double Dragon would have been a bad idea. The Versus mode on the NES was certainly ambitious for what it was, but when you look at a lot of these characters and what they are, they just look really stupid. There's no Will, no Roper, no Linda Lash, so what you just have is just a hodgepodge of Saturday morning garbage. To give credit where credit is due, they did try the ambitious idea of intricating a story mode, as well as affecting your strength, defense, and special attributes, a little bit like Ring King. The big problem with the story mode is that it only gives you a limited number of continues. A fighting game with a limited number of continues. The entire reason why you play fighting games, not in arcades, is that you didn't run out of tokens to finish your game. Computer's a total cheeseball anyway. The only thing he'll do is constantly spam projectiles over and over again, and the hitbox is so frickin' awkward that trying to avoid them is nearly impossible. The special moves suck, they're hard to record the memory, and overall there just isn't any real rewarding experience from playing it. Another Double Dragon fighting game was attempted on the Neo Geo, this time with much better results. This game was based off of the movie, and it's kind of hard to describe what the gameplay is like. My experience with it is very brief, but to kind of sum it up in a bit of a nutshell, you have short range and long range attacks, and depending on where you stand, triggers whichever one happens. The special moves are a tad bit awkward, but I certainly found this to be a much more serviceable fighter than the latter. I've always had a strong affinity for the Neo Geo, though I've never owned an actual AES unit, but the visual style certainly I find very captivating.
Marianne, win!
I think this game is pretty good. It's very unfortunate that it came out on a console that not a lot of people owned, otherwise I think it'd be pretty recommended. Though, again, by that point, people probably preferred Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. And this would also be the very last game that Technos Japan would produce in the Double Dragon series. In 1996, Technos Japan would file for bankruptcy and their intellectual properties would become the possessor of Million Core. They would produce for the Game Boy Advance Double Dragon Advance, which would be a remake of the arcade. Sadly, for the time of this review, I was not able to get my hands on the game in order to play it at the time of this recording. In 2012, we would get Double Dragon Neon produced by WayForward Games, and this is the first time since the 90s that the Double Dragon games will return to the brawler style.
Marion? Oh man, not this again.
And it's sort of a parody of the entire franchise. The humor certainly does mean goodwill, and while it is kind of a tongue-in-cheek jab at the franchise, there's a lot of notable Easter eggs for fans of the series. The combat's slightly less fluid than its retro counterparts, but it still feels familiar and it's very playable, and a lot of the special attacks provided do a lot to add a great deal of variety in the game to keep it from feeling a little stale. It's available on PlayStation Network and Xbox Live, so if you want a good trip down memory lane, Double Dragon Neo will certainly more than suffice. It's a pretty darn good game.
And that wraps up my personal history with Double Dragon. Yes, I probably could have covered multiple games on multiple formats, but there were some that I weren't able to play the games on. So, does something like this or Streets of Rage deserve to be brought back? Maybe, but honestly I kind of think that they're perfect for their time and they should stay there. They symbolized an era that's far gone, and games like Dynasty Warriors today kind of emulate that modern day successor beat 'em up style. So the spirit of the games do kind of live on in some degree, but as far as I'm concerned, they were great as they were, and they should stay that way.